The moon glowed high above the rugged frontier, casting silver light onto the dusty trail where Emily Prescott ran for her life. Her wedding gown, once pristine lace and silk, was now ripped and stained from thorns and mud. The ribbon from her veil fluttered behind her like a surrender flag. She didn't dare stop. Every gallop of her heart reminded her of the church bells that had rung just hours earlier, calling her to a marriage she couldn't accept. Her father had arranged the union with Charles Davenport, a wealthy banker from New York. It was supposed to secure the Prescott family's future, erase debt, and restore social standing. But Emily wasn't a commodity to be traded. The idea of living under the strict thumb of a man who saw everything, including a wife, as property sent ice through her veins. So, while guests sipped champagne and Charles discussed business on his own wedding day, Emily slipped away. But freedom came with a cruel price. The wild was unforgiving. Her delicate slippers were destroyed long ago. Sharp stones cut into her feet with every desperate step. The wind howled like the ghosts of all the brides who wished they'd escaped before her. In the distance, wolves answered the wind closer than she ever hoped they would be. "Keep going," she whispered, hugging herself. "Don't look back." The temperature dropped quickly in the open desert. Her breath turned to mist, drifting like fragile clouds. Panic clawed at her chest. If the cold didn't steal her life, the predator soon would. Then she saw him dotted first. He looked like a shadow on the snow-speckled dirt. A fallen tree? A pile of blankets? Emily approached cautiously, curiosity outweighing fear. And then she gasped. He was a man. A tall, powerful man with long dark hair and strong shoulders. His skin was bronze beneath the moonlight, and a deep wound streaked blood from his side. Feathers braided into his hair marked his identity unmistakably. An Apache warrior. Emily had heard all the warnings. Savages, the settlers muttered. Unpredictable. Dangerous. Stay away. But those warnings came from the same people who believed women shouldn't think for themselves. Tonight, she realized that fear was sometimes just a story told by those in power. She knelt beside him. His breathing was shallow. His forehead burned with fever. Even unconscious, his expression showed strength and pain intertwined. "If I leave you, we both die alone," she murmured. Her hands shook as she tried lifting him. He was too heavy. But adrenaline, pure survival, spiked through her veins. With gritted teeth, she dragged him inch by inch toward a shallow cave she'd spotted earlier. The journey felt endless, but fear pushed her harder than she ever imagined she could endure. Inside, the cave offered shelter from the biting wind. Emily placed his body near the wall, panting, her muscles screaming in protest. She tore strips from her wedding dress, what good was silk now, and pressed them against his wound. He didn't wake, but a faint groan escaped his lips. "It's all right," she whispered. Though she wasn't sure who she was comforting, him or herself, she found dry twigs near the entrance and, with trembling fingers, managed to spark a fire using a flint dropped from his belt. It took several tries. Tears of frustration pricked her eyes, but finally the flames flickered to life. Warmth washed over her, but it wasn't enough. His shivering body needed more. Emily hesitated, staring at his broad chest rising and falling. The choice was simple: fear him and freeze, or trust him and survive. Bravery isn't lack of fear, her mother once told her. It's doing the right thing even when fear is loud. Slowly, gently, Emily lay down beside him, resting her head on his chest. His heartbeat, steady and powerful, echoed against her ear, grounding her in a moment that felt impossible and terrifying. Yet safe. She inhaled the warm, earthy scent of him. Her body relaxed for the first time all night. This man, this stranger, was now her only protection. Unconsciously, he shifted, his arm falling around her shoulders. as if he recognized her presence even while unconscious. Heat radiated between them. Her cheeks flushed. She wasn't supposed to feel anything like this, not with a man she didn't know, and certainly not with an Apache. But Emily was done living her life according to what was supposed to be done. As the fire crackled gently, she closed her eyes. Fate had thrown her into the arms of a man from a world she'd been taught to fear. Yet his heart beat strong and sure told a different story. Tonight, fear met courage. Tonight, a runaway bride found refuge in an unexpected heart, and in the silence, a spark began to burn. Morning broke slowly over the jagged ridges of the frontier, painting the sky with muted shades of pink and gold. Emily stirred in the cave, her head still resting against the broad chest of the Apache warrior, Lone Hawk. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, yet warmth lingered, embracing them both. She blinked against the sunlight filtering through the cave entrance and realized she had spent the entire night beside him, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, a rhythm that had become more familiar than her own in a matter of hours. Lone Hawk groaned softly as consciousness returned, blinking against the light. His dark eyes met hers, searching, wary but not hostile. Emily froze, unsure of what to say, terrified that she had overstepped some invisible boundary. She had never been so close to a man who was a stranger, yet somehow that closeness felt necessary. He was wounded, and she had become the only person capable of keeping him alive. You're awake," she stammered, her voice a mixture of relief and hesitation. I helped you. You were hurt. You needed shelter." Lone Hawk studied her silently, noticing the torn dress, the scratches on her arms, and the exhaustion etched into her delicate features. For a moment, the wildness of the frontier, the danger, the cold, the wilderness disappeared, leaving only two souls in a small, dim cave. Then he nodded, his expression softening. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice low and steady. "You saved my life." Emily's heart skipped a beat. The words were simple, yet they carried a weight she had never expected. Gratitude in this man's voice felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. She realized then that despite the stories she had been told, not all men who carried power sought to dominate or harm. Some were simply human. They shared a small meal together, bread and dried meat. Emily had scavenged from her satchel, and Lone Hawk taught her how to make it last longer. He spoke of the land as if it were alive, describing the plants, the water, and the trails with reverence. Emily listened, fascinated, realizing how little she knew of the world she had run into. The Apache warrior had been taught to survive through observation, patience, and respect, a stark contrast to the rigid rules of polite society she had fled. "Most people fear what they do not understand," Lone Hawk said, breaking her reverie. "But fear does not protect you. Understanding does." Emily nodded, absorbing the lesson. She had spent years learning etiquette, piano lessons, and embroidery, yet no one had taught her how to survive or to trust someone completely different from herself. Now, pressed between fear and fascination, she saw that survival was not just about the body. It was about the heart too. As they prepared to leave the cave and move toward a safer area, Emily hesitated. She started, unsure how to phrase the thought racing in her mind. "I'm not supposed to feel safe with you, or anything else. But I do. I feel something I've never felt before." Lone Hawk looked down at her, a small, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "It is natural," he said. "When trust is given, the heart awakens. Fear fades. Courage grows. Do not be afraid of your own heart, Emily Prescott." Her cheeks flushed and she looked away, embarrassed but strangely elated. That simple lesson, trust, was revolutionary for her. She had fled one cage only to discover another kind of freedom, the freedom to choose whom to trust, whom to love, and how to survive. They set out together. Emily walking alongside Lone Hawk, learning to step lightly, to read the signs of the land, and to move without making a sound. For the first time, she understood the true meaning of respect, not just for people, but for the land itself. And as she felt the steady strength of his hand occasionally brush against hers, she realized that the spark she had felt in the cave was not just desire, it was admiration, trust, and an emerging love born from shared struggle. By the end of the day, the wilderness no longer felt entirely threatening. Emily had learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the act of moving forward despite it. And in Lone Hawk's quiet presence, she discovered that a human connection, honest, respectful, and reciprocal, could be more powerful than any social contract or wealth her father could offer. As night fell again, Emily settled near the fire, Lone Hawk at her side. Their journey had only begun, but already she felt her heart opening to a world she had never known, and to a man who had proven that the right kind of trust could ignite a fire in the soul. Tonight, as her head rested again against his chest, Emily felt it, a warmth deeper than fire, a bond forged in survival, courage, and respect. And somewhere inside her, desire hidden, unexpected, yet undeniable, began to bloom. The sun dipped low over the horizon, painting the sky with fiery oranges and purples. Emily and Lone Hawk had traveled most of the day, moving cautiously along the winding trails of the frontier. Emily's feet ached, but she had grown steadier with each step, guided by the Apache warrior's careful instructions. He pointed out safe streams, edible plants, and hidden paths that avoided the prying eyes of towns and settlers. By nightfall, they found a sheltered grove, surrounded by tall pines and protected from the cold wind. Lone Hawk built a small fire, expertly arranging stones to contain the flames. Emily watched him, her chest still fluttering from the events of the last 24 hours. She had never imagined that she would feel this alive, not in the ballroom of her father's mansion, not under the ornate chandeliers of polite society, and certainly not in the company of a man whose world had seemed so distant and foreign. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a blanket beside the fire. "Rest your feet. Tomorrow will be long." Emily obeyed, brushing the dust from her skirt, though she knew it would do little good. She caught sight of his hands as he worked, strong, calloused, yet precise. She wondered how many hardships those hands had endured, how many battles they had fought, how many times they had healed the wounded and protected the vulnerable. She felt a strange flutter in her chest, one that went beyond gratitude or admiration. "You are quiet," Lone Hawk observed, settling across from her. The firelight danced in his eyes, giving them a depth she hadn't noticed before. "What do you think?" Emily hesitated. She had spent so long suppressing her own thoughts, her own desires, that speaking them aloud felt dangerous. But there was something in his calm presence that encouraged honesty. I think I have been wrong," she admitted softly. "I thought all men like you would be dangerous. I thought the world was divided between friend and enemy, settler and Indian, rich and poor. But now—" She trailed off, unsure how to finish. "Now?" Lone Hawk prompted gently. "Now I see it is not so simple," she whispered. "I see that courage and respect matter more than wealth or fear. And I see you. I see your strength, your patience, your honor." For a moment, Lone Hawk said nothing. Then he leaned back, studying her with an intensity that made her stomach flutter. "It is rare for someone to recognize this," he said finally. "Most are blinded by what they are told, or by what they desire to believe. You are different." Emily's cheeks burned. She looked down at her hands, nervously twisting a strand of hair. I feel strange," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Last night, when I lay by your side, your heartbeat, your warmth, it made me feel safe. And now, here with you, I feel something else. Something I do not understand." Lone Hawk's eyes softened. "What you feel is natural," he said. "You are learning to trust. And where trust exists, the heart awakens. Desire is not wrong. It is a signal that you are alive, that you are not afraid to feel." Emily swallowed hard, realizing the truth of his words. Fear had dominated her life for too long, fear of her father, fear of societal expectation, fear of the unknown. But here, in the wild, with this man who had saved her life and taught her to respect the land and herself, desire felt not shameful but powerful. It was courage and longing intertwined, a fire she could neither ignore nor deny. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows across their faces. Emily found herself inching closer to him, drawn by the warmth of his presence and the safety she felt in his calm strength. Lone Hawk did not move away. Instead, he met her gaze steadily, silently giving her permission to explore the feelings she had long buried. "Do you ever wonder if we are meant to be something more than strangers?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. Lone Hawk smiled faintly. "All of life is uncertain," he said. "But what we do with trust, courage, and love, that is our choice. Perhaps this, what we share, is a beginning. Perhaps it is more." Emily felt a thrill of hope and fear entwined. The spark that had begun in the cave last night was no longer a flicker, it was a fire. Fierce and undeniable, ignited by trust, respect, and the raw, unguarded truth between them. Tonight, under the twilight sky, Emily Prescott discovered something she had never known, that desire and courage could exist together, that the heart could expand beyond fear, and that in the wild frontier, love could ignite even in the most unexpected of places. And in the quiet glow of the firelight, two souls, one runaway bride, one Apache warrior, felt the stirrings of something profound, a bond that neither money, fear, nor prejudice could ever extinguish. Emily awoke to the chirping of birds and the faint scent of pine needles and morning dew. For a brief moment, she felt a fragile peace. Nestled beside Lone Hawk, the memory of last night's firelight and whispered confessions made her heart flutter. Yet reality soon intruded. The world beyond this secluded grove was far from safe. Her father's banker, Charles Davenport, would never let her escape willingly. The Prescott family's debts and reputation were at stake, and Emily's act of rebellion was not only a personal affront, it was a financial one. Davenport had the means to send men into the wilderness to retrieve what he considered his property, a bride. Emily shivered at the thought. Lone Hawk, sensing her unease, studied the horizon. "They will come," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You are not their property. You will not be taken. But we must move quickly." Emily nodded, her determination rising alongside her fear. "Then let's go," she said. "I am not running from them forever. I want to face this, but with you." They traveled through hidden trails, Emily learning to move silently over rocks and roots, to read signs of danger in broken branches and disturbed soil. Lone Hawk's teachings were methodical, but Emily noticed that he was also teaching her confidence, how to trust her instincts, how to remain calm under pressure, how to value her own judgment. By late afternoon, the distant sound of galloping hooves and barking dogs reached their ears. Lone Hawk crouched, pressing Emily behind a boulder. "They've found us," he whispered. "Hired guns, armed, expecting no resistance." Emily's stomach tightened, but she remembered his lessons. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite it. She peered around the rock and saw 3 men approaching, rifles in hand, faces hard with expectation. They had no idea the woman they chased had learned to survive. When the men shouted her name, demanding she surrender, Emily stepped forward, standing beside Lone Hawk. "I am not your property," she shouted, her voice cutting through the tense air. "No man can claim me by money or threat." Lone Hawk's eyes glimmered with pride. For the first time, Emily wasn't only relying on his protection, she was asserting herself. One of the men fired, aiming to scare, but Lone Hawk moved with precision, deflecting the shot and knocking the gun aside. The next moments were a blur of motion. Lone Hawk's skill and Emily's quick thinking combined, creating a defense neither had practiced together but instinctively executed. Emily tripped over a root, grabbed a branch, and swung it at a man advancing toward her. He stumbled, surprised by her courage, and she realized that her fear had transformed into action. The leader of the hired men, Charles Davenport's chief enforcer, glared at Emily and Lone Hawk. "Bring her back. You don't know what you're messing with." Emily planted her feet firmly, her voice unwavering. "I know exactly what I'm doing. I am choosing my own life. I am choosing who I love. And that is not you, or your money, or your threats." The words struck harder than any weapon. Lone Hawk surged forward, disarming the men with skill and precision, while Emily guided them toward a hidden ravine she had noticed earlier. By the time the hired guns realized what was happening, they had lost both prey and advantage. Frustrated and humiliated, they retreated, leaving Emily and Lone Hawk standing together, victorious but wary. Emily exhaled, her chest heaving. She looked at Lone Hawk, feeling a surge of gratitude, admiration, and yes, desire. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted, her voice soft, almost vulnerable. "No," he said gently, "you could have. You were brave. You stood for yourself. I only guided you. Courage was always yours." Emily's heart swelled at his words. For the first time in her life, she felt the true meaning of empowerment. She was not a prize to be claimed, a pawn in a transaction, or a frightened girl fleeing a forced marriage. She was a woman with agency, intelligence, and a heart capable of both love and courage. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky in streaks of red and gold, Emily and Lone Hawk set up camp for the night. Their bond had deepened, not just through survival, but through trust, mutual respect, and shared triumph. And in the quiet twilight, Emily pressed her hand against Lone Hawk's, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. The spark that had begun in the cave, ignited by trust and desire, now burned brighter, a fire that no threat could extinguish. Tonight, the runaway bride knew something profound. She was no longer running from her life. She was running toward it, toward freedom, love, and the man who had taught her the strength in both. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the distant roar of a river over rocky banks. Emily awoke wrapped in a blanket, Lone Hawk sitting nearby sharpening his knife, the fire crackling faintly between them. The events of the previous day replayed in her mind. The chase, the confrontation, the surge of courage she had never known she possessed. She realized that she was no longer the timid girl fleeing her father's control. She was a woman capable of standing her ground, making choices, and fighting for the life she wanted. They had traveled further from Davenport's reach, seeking safety in the hidden trails known only to Lone Hawk and his people. But Emily sensed that simply running was not enough. She wanted to confront the danger, to assert her independence fully, and to take responsibility for her own destiny. "I can't keep hiding forever," she said, breaking the morning silence. Her voice was steady, filled with resolve. "If I'm going to be free, I have to face him. I have to end this once and for all." Lone Hawk looked at her carefully, noting the fire in her eyes. "Then we do it together," he said. "But remember, courage without strategy can be dangerous. We must think. We must plan. Emily nodded, feeling a strange thrill of empowerment. For the first time, her life felt like her own story, not a script written by her father or a banker. She realized that bravery was not only about running or fighting, it was about knowing what you wanted and acting decisively to claim it. By afternoon, they had tracked Davenport's men to a remote clearing. Emily crouched behind a fallen tree, peering at the group as they argued over supplies. The men looked strong and organized, but Emily had learned much in the past days, how to read intentions, anticipate movements, and move without being noticed. She was no longer the frightened bride. She was an active participant in her own rescue. Lone Hawk whispered instructions, guiding her through the approach. Emily's heart pounded, not with fear, but with determination. When Davenport's chief enforcer advanced toward her hiding spot, she swung a branch with practiced precision, knocking him off balance. Lone Hawk acted simultaneously, disarming another man with swift skill. Together, they moved like a single unit, her courage complementing his strength, her wit complementing his experience. When Davenport himself arrived, furious and demanding obedience, Emily stepped forward. "I am not your property," she declared, her voice ringing clear across the clearing. "You will never control me. I choose my own life, and I choose who I love." The banker's face turned red with rage. "You dare speak to me like that?" he shouted. "Yes," Emily replied, lifting her chin. "I dare. And you will learn that no money, no threat, and no fear can take my freedom from me." Lone Hawk moved to stand beside her, his presence calm but commanding. Emily felt a surge of pride. She had not only survived, she had become a force, asserting her own will. The hired men, seeing the courage in both Emily and Lone Hawk, hesitated, unsure if they could win against such determination. The balance had shifted. With careful planning and unwavering resolve, Emily and Lone Hawk guided the men back toward the paths they had left behind, ensuring they could not easily return. Davenport, humiliated and powerless, fled the scene, leaving the runaway bride and the Apache warrior standing victorious in the clearing. Emily exhaled deeply, her body trembling with adrenaline and relief. She looked at Lone Hawk, realizing that in this wild, dangerous world, she had found a man who did not seek to control her, but to stand with her. The spark that had begun in the cave, ignited in firelight and strengthened through danger, now burned hotter than ever. She stepped closer to him, brushing dirt from his sleeve. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted, her voice soft but sincere. "You could have," Lone Hawk replied, his eyes meeting hers. "Courage has always been yours. I only showed you the path." Emily smiled, feeling a warmth that went beyond fire or sunlight. For the first time, she realized that love and respect could coexist. That desire could flourish in safety and equality, and that a woman could stand as an equal partner in her own story. That night, as the stars glimmered above the quiet wilderness, Emily pressed her head against Lone Hawk's chest once more. But this time, it was not only for warmth or safety, it was a deliberate, conscious choice to be close to a man she trusted, admired, and desired. The runaway bride had become a woman who chose her own destiny, and she knew, deep in her heart, that this was only the beginning of a life built on freedom, courage, and love. The morning sun rose over the rugged horizon, spilling golden light across the rolling hills and dense forests. Emily and Lone Hawk traveled in silence, their journey marked by cautious optimism. The wilderness had taught Emily lessons no ballroom or drawing room ever could: the value of trust, the strength and courage, and the power of choosing one's own path. But now, she was approaching a new kind of frontier, one where she would discover community, belonging, and love beyond societal expectation. Lone Hawk led her to a small clearing, where the sound of drums and laughter echoed faintly through the trees. His people had settled near a river, and the village was modest but alive with life. Children ran barefoot across sun-warmed earth. Women carried baskets of berries and woven goods, and men practiced archery and hunting. It was a world entirely different from the rigid structures Emily had known. Yet it felt welcoming, alive, and honest. As they entered the village, some villagers paused to observe the newcomers. Lone Hawk introduced Emily, explaining the story of their journey and her bravery. There was a moment of silence, then murmurs of approval. One elder woman approached Emily, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You are courageous," she said kindly. "You honor the heart that saved you and the trust you have given." Emily felt a swell of pride, realizing she was not only accepted but respected. The Apache community had not judged her for her past, her upbringing, or her mistakes. They valued her actions, her courage, and her willingness to learn. For the first time, Emily understood a profound truth. Community thrives not on power or wealth, but on respect, kindness, and shared responsibility. Over the following weeks, Emily learned the ways of the land. She helped gather food, tended to the sick, and listened to stories passed down through generations. Lone Hawk guided her with patience, teaching her hunting, tracking, and survival skills, but also encouraging her to question, observe, and grow. Emily found joy in each small accomplishment, and she felt her spirit flourish in ways she never imagined possible. As their bond deepened, so did their love. One evening, under a blanket of stars, Lone Hawk took Emily's hands in his own. "You have proven bravery beyond measure," he said softly, his gaze steady and warm. "And yet I see more than courage. I see a heart that chooses freely, that loves with honesty, and that trusts in life even after danger. Will you stay with me, Emily Prescott, not as a captive, but as a partner, a friend, and a bride of your own choosing?" Emily's eyes filled with tears of joy. She pressed her head against his chest, remembering the first night in the cave, the night that had sparked their journey together. "Yes," she whispered. "I choose this. I choose you. And I choose to live my life fully, freely, and honestly with you by my side." The villagers celebrated their union with a simple, heartfelt ceremony. No gold, no opulent gowns, no pomp, just love, respect, and community. Emily wore a hand-woven dress, and Lone Hawk stood tall beside her, their hands entwined. The children laughed and danced, the elders smiled, and the sound of drums filled the night. It was a celebration not only of love, but of freedom, courage, and mutual respect. In the months that followed, Emily and Lone Hawk built a home together near the river. They cultivated the land, learned from each other, and shared stories under the stars. Emily realized that the world she had fled, the world of wealth, fear, and societal expectation, was not truly her own. Her heart belonged here, where love was chosen, courage was honored, and respect guided every action. Looking back, Emily understood the true lessons of her journey, that fear can be overcome with courage, that trust can ignite a fire stronger than desire or danger, and that love must always be rooted in freedom and equality. She had been a runaway bride. Yes, but she had become a woman who chose her own destiny, embraced her own power, and discovered a love that transcended borders, prejudices, and expectation. And as she leaned against Lone Hawk's chest once more, under the warm glow of the evening sun, Emily Prescott knew this was her home, her heart, her life, and her love forever. The frontier had tested her, shaped her, and finally led her to a world where she was free, cherished, and truly alive. The end.